Our Vice Chancellor ma'am was not originally scheduled to join us for inauguration, but it so happened that she did join for inauguration. And a situation has arisen in the university that requires her immediate attention along with some of the top officials, and they are doing some firefighting there. And she has requested Professor Kumaraswamy to hold the fort for today. So, as I said, all happens for good. She did join our program initially, and she lended a lot to this program, which I will eventually unfold in my vote of thanks. So, I'll hand over the proceedings to our Dean Sir, Professor Shrikant Kondapalli, to take over the proceedings.
Thank you, Samina. Good afternoon to all of you. We are having a series of lectures on the G20 process. Our colleagues participated in the discussion. There were a lot of questions that were raised in these, and it is really fruitful so far on the G20 as a kind of curtain riser for the proceedings that are going to happen on 9th and 10th in a few days. So we have had much discussion on these, and let me thank Professor Balaji for Samina and Professor Kumar Swamy, who were all behind the program, and I think it was quite successful so far. As you know, as has been deliberated so far, we have had a few interesting outcomes of the G20 in the last few days, a few weeks. Over 220 places have been identified, and some 69 cities have been hosting these events across the. So from SIS point of view, it adds to a new dimension in Indian foreign policy posture on socialization of the foreign policy towards the second tier, third tier cities in India. So this is one significant aspect that has come about. We do not know what is going to be the final agenda, or it would be a chair's summary on the 10th when the leaders meet and issue a statement, a joint statement, a communique, or whatever it is called. Two already have declared they will not be coming to the G20 meeting, President Putin and President Xi Jinping. And President Biden's wife is positive with COVID, and one doesn't know about President Biden. But that is in the speculative field. What is important is whether the joint communique will be issued that include A, B, C, D, as we expected. As we discussed in this room last almost 2 weeks, whether those issues will come up or not, we do not know. There is the Russian foreign minister stating a few things about the final agenda should include a few aspects according to their preference, while others have their own agenda. So that means whether Ukrainian conflict, like in Bali summit, would be the major point of attention in the current G20 process is still a major issue that needs to be looked at. But there are some concrete issues, and in this room it was mentioned there were 59 items on which there is about 90% consensus on various issues that are going to come up in the G20 declaration. One of that is, of course, the SDGs, and on that there is not much of dilemma, not much of controversy. And G20 as such, since its inception, has raised a lot of economic issues and how to overcome the financial crisis and resurrect the economic growth rates. So from that point of view, there is the SDGs would be the focal area of attention, and we probably will see much wording here on what could be the targets. The second, on which there is a lot of consensus, is on climate change issues. Since Paris meeting in 2015, there is the nationally bound declarations that every nation has to now make for the UNCC and other organizations, and climate change issues are one where we have some consensus. And of course, the $100 billion fund that the Paris meeting has announced, that has not yet been fulfilled, and so there is some concern about nations switching over from coal to the other renewable forms of energy, and who will finance these. These are from the R&D perspective, from the capital perspective, there is a lot that is required from the developed countries, and hence there is a major issue there on finance on the climate change and other aspects. There are also other areas of consensus, as it was mentioned in this room before in the last 2 weeks, about the digitalization. And we have gone through various stages of currency digitalization, trade digitalization, and other aspects. There are many more areas where we have some consensus, and it is likely that these will be reflected in the final statement. So we are at the fag end of this discussion in SIS, and we have also some 6 months ago requested colleagues to join us in contributing to a volume. So the second track is also going on at its own pace. But Samina, Kumaraswamy, Professor Balaji took the initiative and prodded us in giving these discussions here in the last 2 weeks, and it was quite successful. So since we are in the final stages now of these discussions, let me request Professor Kumaraswamy to chip in and what has been the experience so far, and both in terms of organizing such events as well as on the G20 as such. Would you like to say?
Thank you, Dean. And I'm asked to do the honors literally 5 minutes ago, because ma'am was taken for an emergency, said, Kumar, step in and do it. So I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to say. And I had the misfortune of attending all the lectures, but standing outside the room to ensure that everybody's needs are taken care of. So with the result, at least one thing for sure, nobody will accuse me of plagiarism, because I didn't know what was going on here. So for the little thoughts I assembled in the last 5 minutes, and I seek your indulgence. You know, the G20 puts India in an entirely different frame. This is not something India was comfortable with from 1947. We wanted a large group because we did not know which one will support and where we will go. The decolonization provided a good framework because the global was predominantly Western and colonial powers. So if you look at the founding numbers, we had about 50 countries. So now we have 180 plus. So therefore, decolonization gave us a very good opening, saying that, okay, as more and more countries become free, we have a forum to articulate our interests. But if you look back, Indian experience, it's not very comfortable with. And whenever there was a crisis, they were very non-descriptive or very symbolic, and we had to do ourselves. But similarly, if you look at the end of the Cold War, it forced us to take a different look. And everybody says India is a great country, but nobody was ready to do that. And if you even go back to how many countries where leaders were visiting India, and as students, we all know that the best month is September. Not this September, about 20 years ago, September was really a good month, We all look forward to come September. So the September to early March was the only time all the international leaders will come, because that's a good weather in India. No, otherwise you will not find. Today nobody thinks about the weather. No matter what is the weather in Delhi, the only question they ask you is, do you have a slot for me? But how did this happen? This largely, you can say, economic liberalization, but liberalization takes its own time frame. So it took about 10 years minimum. But the real shift was 98, when the nuclear test took place. And if you read the American remarks at that time, their rhetoric was stop, freeze, and roll back. And within 2 years, Clinton was in the Lok Sabha. That tells you the dynamics. If you are determined to pursue your path, the world will come to terms with you. As long as you are sure about what you are doing, and you are doing for tomorrow, not for yesterday, the world will come to terms. And that is why the same leaders were talking about all the isolation, exclusion, and India's snake charmers and everything. Now, why do they do it? The logic is economic development. That's exactly the point. And what is the greatest quotation you can get? None other than Pakistani foreign minister or prime minister, who said, you know, our Ummah is more interested in the billions of Indian market rather than solidarity with us on 370. And you can't need a better statement than that. But at the same time, we know that India, a country like India, cannot be having an alliance with anybody. If you are too small, you can be an ally. If you are too big, you can be an ally. You are somewhere in between. And therefore, no country can look at India as an ally, alliance in the sense of the word. And similarly, India cannot be an alliance partner of anybody. Alliance, in a simplest expression, would mean sign up A to Z. As the global order was changing, if you remember in the 1990s, we were all discussing not the unipolar world or bipolar world, multipolar world. This is what IDSC and others were talking in the 90s. And that's exactly what is happening today. You have a multipolar world. And in that context, you need to position yourself in a way which is both acceptable and commensurate to India's position, but also respectful. I think that is why we are finding ourselves in G20. And since he took over office in 2014, Prime Minister did not meet a single G20 meeting. He always made himself available, which is not the case for our traditional platform, non-alignment. If my memory is correct, the only summit he attended was the virtual summit last time. He never attended any physical summit since assuming office. He sent somebody else. And for the sake of argument, he said, oh, not the prime minister, the vice president is going, protocol-wise, is higher than the prime minister. Right. But the prime minister is the one who actually makes a difference, not the vice president. And that is what it is. But it also indicates India's desire for multilateralism. You can see any number of examples you have seen, from BRICS to IRO to IRC to now ITU to any number of things. But it all tells us two things. One, we are ready to look at the world in a much more diverse manner, in the sense there may be a convergence of interest with party number A, but we may have a difference with the same partner. So therefore, you can no longer have the comfort zone of the Cold War. In a number of ways, Cold War was very, very simple. Whatever Soviet Union does, if you follow the camp, matter ends. You don't have to worry about other things, not in terms of thinking, not in terms of priorities, not in terms of even explanation. You copy paste. Even though copy paste option was not available during the Cold War. You have to type and copy. There is no other way. Today you can copy paste. But the end of the Cold War actually poses an enormous issue. You have an agreement with X, but disagreement with on the same issue. So therefore, you need to have a multilateralism. Ideally speaking, I would want a G2. I don't know who will be the other partner yet. My understanding is if I play my card well, I can choose about 4 or 5 who will be my G2 partner. Maybe a few years ago, you can say that G2, the other partner will be the United States. That is no longer the case. So I'm keeping my partner open. Maybe in 10 years from today, we will not be talking about NAM, we will not be talking about G20, we may be talking about G2. But that presupposes you're going to have a different sets of priorities. It is no longer confined to economic development or power politics or even growth. It's no longer the case. If that is the case, you can talk about national interests and hard power calculations. As the title says, it is an inclusive world we are looking at. Vasudeva Kutumbakam. And which basically means you are willing to accept the diversities of the world without making any value judgment. That's a precondition. This is an inclusive world does not mean a patronizing world. While it has an India's role and place in that world order, it doesn't mean it is dominated by India. It would not mean even dominated by Indian value system. I think if that is the case, you are looking at an hegemony, whatever name you want to give. So therefore, if you look at an inclusive world, this is what you are making an interesting twist. Which means you need to redefine the world order. And the world order not in basis of power, but whatever little I was able to recollect in the last few minutes, I could see probably two major areas where you are focusing your attention. One is environment, the other is sustainable development. Both are interrelated. Unless the environment is not a single country affair or even a single region issue. And we have so many examples for that. So therefore, environment is going to be a major problem. I will give you a personal example. When I first, normally I go to Israel on a Saturday. Friday my class is finished. I take a flight and go to Saturday. And the temperature in Delhi in May is somewhere around 40 degrees. So I normally wear a t-shirt and go and land in Tel Aviv. The moment I land in Tel Aviv, my wife will give me a jacket because the weather is extremely cold there. So she will give me a jacket and then we'll go to Tel Aviv. This was the situation much of the 1990s and even in 2000. In 2019, I was in Tel Aviv in the night. It was somewhere around 9:30 in the evening. I could see the temperature in the car. It was 37 degrees at 9:30 in the night. So you don't need an enormous research and academic work to find out how the temperature is changing. From about 21 degrees in daytime, it is moved to 37 degrees at 9:30 in the night. So therefore, when you talk about environment, you don't need a research or a PhD or anything. You actually understand it. You can see the kind of dress you wear, the kind of weather you are living, it's very visible. And it is no longer confined to a single country. So therefore, when you are talking about inclusiveness, that is one area you talk about. And related to one is the sustainable development. And sustainable development, which basically in the broadest term would mean your ability to exploit the natural resources without depleting the rights of the next generation. That's the largest sense you can understand. And if you do that, whatever we are doing will have to be part of that exercise. And therefore, when we talk about conflicts in the world, it is no longer bringing peace between countries, peace between groups. And if you talk at a philosophical level, peace is a relative term. How do you explain a peace between a goat and a lion? For a sheep, it would mean, leave me alone. I want to live. For a lion, sheep in my stomach. So therefore, the definition of peace actually varies depending upon individual. You cannot simply say sheep has more rights than the lion. That's all academic arguments. But when you look at the reality, this is what it is. So therefore, we need to look at a world which is inclusive. At the same time, whenever you look at a problem, it is more holistic. I wish that I had the opportunity to sit through yesterday's when Professor Pandey was talking about Ukraine conflict. And unfortunately, I couldn't one more time. Is it a foreign policy issue? Is it a question of sovereign rights? Is it a question of energy security? Or is it a question of food security? How do you look at the conflict? Is it simply accepting my friend is Russia, whatever Russia says is right? Or the same vice versa. My friend is Ukraine, whatever he does is right. So how do you define it? So it is no longer whichever way you define. The question is not about whom you support, whom you don't support. The question is how you take everyone with you. I think that is going to be the real challenge. And to have that challenge, India, as if you look at it, has been able to engage with diverse groups. It is not just a political ploy to say that, okay, how many countries in the General Assembly support me? How many countries will vote for me on an issue? No. It is basically looking at issues where you can develop a larger global consensus, whether it is the Solar Alliance or any of these matters. I think that is visible, I would say, at least in the foreign policy front. India has been engaging with a wide range of countries. And since I only look at my own region in a very narrow sense of the word, since 2014, Prime Minister met the Saudi leadership every single summit except the one in Germany where the Saudis sent a lawyer official. Otherwise, he has met the Saudi king or the crown prince, which indicates that, it is not that India and Saudi Arabia have an identical political setup. And one is not even suggesting which is better or which is not. That is not the issue here. The issue is how two seemingly different countries are trying to identify issues on which they can conquer and develop. You may think only economic cooperation is the only area. More than that. If you look at an extremism is a threat to India. It is also a threat to Saudi rulership. When you look at all the joint statements, you will find it. So therefore, this is the kind of area we need to look at in the days to come. And one thing the G20 tells us, the kind of diverse composition of people and diverse capacity of individual countries and what India can offer to them or take from them. Let us not pretend that India in a situation that everybody is at the receiving end. No. We also have to learn from others. Knowledge is always a two-way traffic. If I say that everybody will have to learn from me, that presupposes I should be ready to learn from everyone. Even a small country has something good to offer to me, whether it is Bhutan or even you can talk about Russia. Size is immaterial. Your talents are different. And India should be willing to learn from everyone. I think that is how Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam actually means. It doesn't mean the world will learn from me as if I'm the paragon of virtue. No. Let's not have that attitude. Whether it is for an individual, society, or a nation. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam actually means it's a two-way traffic. Just like I'm happy to give as much as I have, I'm also prepared to take as much as the world has to offer to us. I think then only any relationship can be surviving, enduring. It applies to individual, it applies to states. Anything which is one-sided will not survive. I think that is what you're going to say. One final word. I don't know how long I have a time and how long I've spoken, but one final thing. And which is, everybody would have mentioned this, the absence of Russia and China. In a way, it's good. Actually, it's a blessing. Because if they are not there, a lot of things will not be discussed. The only thing people will talk about is Russia is not there, China is not there. But if you are there, every full stop and comma will get into trouble. Even now, we can agree only that's behind the scene, whatever you agree, the final communique. So therefore, the absence, in a way, I think it's a blessing, I would say. It gives us enormous space to focus on what we have agreed with the remaining 18 people without much of a diversion. Sometimes, I'm not talking in my own present case. That I'm not saying that anyway that VC's absence is good. I'm not saying in that sense. Don't get me wrong and get me into trouble. What I'm saying is sometimes the absence of somebody is actually a blessing. And I think we should accept this and get on with it. And therefore, the absence of two people will be just one line. They're not there. Okay. Fine. Then, what did the remaining 18 do? I think we should focus on them. If you do that, I'm relatively confident that no, we could find a lot of things in common without baggages. Because dealing with a great power is always difficult. One thinks it's a great power, but the Americans don't recognize. The other country thinks that no, I'm a nuclear power and economic power, but the world still thinks I'm a nincompoop. So therefore, both have a problem. If they're not there, it's actually good news for us. And once again, whatever I said is just in the 5 minutes time I had from the time I left my office, ma'am's office and here. The idea of this whole thing was, with your permission, it came with Balaji sir. He simply said, Kumar, I can support an idea of a conference. And you can do maybe 2.5 days conference. I said, okay, 2.5 days is a good time. But then we recognize 2.5 means every faculty member will have 15 minutes to speak. There is nothing you can say, all your scholarship cannot be put across in 15 minutes, no matter, even if you are Confucius. You can't. So therefore we said, why don't we give everyone one full hour? And with the question answered, we will have a good debate. And therefore we went to the dean and said, can I do 15 days lecture? And at that contest, with your permission, okay, it's fine. That's what is okay. Okay, that's all is yours. So it is in that contest we expanded. The idea is simple. We have the talent. No matter how many disagreements we have among ourselves. If you look at an objective, maybe we can ask AI to make an assessment. The cream of AI in India is in this building. And also the world. Okay? It's not that only this building. Okay. So this is where it is. Whether you like it or not, that's a different story. Take an objective assessment. Ask an AI, please tell me who are the best guys in your respective field. It's going to be SIS. But for a variety of reasons, because of COVID and other things, we could not do it and expose. And I think therefore, this is, I would say with all humility, this is going to break the barrier which we developed among ourselves. It's very immense, even though I did not come inside, it's very immensely happy to see a large number of faculties coming and attending the lectures of others. And that's a delightful experience. I think this is a beginning. And if you're able to do that, we will do it much bigger one. And once again, I'm humbled to be asked to do this. Even though it's a command, I can't say no. Kumar won't do it. I just have to do it. But the idea is, the G20, whatever might happen in the 9th and 10th at the official level, it gives us an enormous opportunity for us. We can even develop a G20 network among the universities with whom we have an MOU. We can simply create a G20 paradigm. Whoever is, we can collaborate with all of them. We can see how it goes. We can actually do that. So there are enormous opportunities, and the only thing will be, it will be inclusive, it will be respectful, no patronization, no gatekeeping, and therefore we are ready to learn from everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kumar. Let me utilize this occasion to open up for discussion among colleagues and researchers on the G20, not about anything else. We focus on G20. Who wants to raise a question? Yeah.
Russia and China absent. I think they are not absent from G20. They are very much participating. Only thing is that their participation is at the lower level. But for all practical purposes, they would be there. And whatever positive, negative contribution they'll have to make, they will make. So I don't think they are absent in G20.
President is representing India rather than Modi. That's all it's about. Substantial shift in India's approach to the region. And if Narasimha Rao started Look East, and Modi made it into Act West. And the kind of engagement India had with the region is unprecedented since 1947. And a number of countries had the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister since independence. So if you look at in the political level, it is enormous. The only problem is walking the talk. So what political leadership can actually make an engagement, open the doors, and create an opportunity. It is up to the rest of the establishment to implement that. I think that is where we have been relatively slower. Okay, there is a gap between the potential and the actual realization, and this is where the lacuna comes up. Otherwise, and Prime Minister and the Emirati leadership have met about 10 times, both bilateral visits and in multilateral forums. The same applies to Iranian leaders. And same applies to Iran. So therefore, you have the political engagement is unprecedented, but will it be realizing the potential? That is where the difficulty comes.
Good evening, sir. My name is Shaurya. I am from Center for Political Studies, JNU, PhD first year. Sir, my question is to it was a very nice lecture, sir, very late. Sir, my question to you is, sir, when you talk about sir, engagement, inclusiveness, and Vasudev Kutumbukum, that we are here to learn from the world, and we are pursuing an inclusive policy at an international level where we are engaging with different types of groups. So, sir, sir, do you see in our domestic politics, our stance has been very, very contrary to what we are pursuing internationally? Like, say, in the CAA itself, in terms of the exclusion of a certain minority. So, in that sense, our stance has been too paradoxical as well. When we talk about an idea like Vasudev Kutumbukum, so sir, do you think that there should be some kind of intersectionality between the domestic politics and the politics which we pursue internationally, sir? Thank you.
My doctor says nowhere go near the sugar, okay? So when you give me a very sweet Swiss chocolate, I can't control myself. Okay, this is, there is always a difference. What you want to be and what you are, there is always a difference. Let's accept it as a human fragility. It's not pretend that. And if everybody able to walk the talk, all of us should be living in Himalayas. They were renouncing everything else as a pope or a saint or a ayatollah. Having said that, there is always a difference between the domestic and foreign policies, always. What you are telling the world and what you are actually doing domestically invariably doesn't add. Sometimes you have your internally very democratic society, externally very oppressive. If you look at the US track record in the entire Cold War, all the dictators were great friends of the United States, even though it was an antithesis to them. And the same applies to even India. Who was our greatest friend during the Cold War? Not a democratic country, Russia. So therefore, we can always find contradictions. But my interest and specialization is on the foreign policy stuff. That's not my area. You can ask Sachin Tendulkar to do a Bharatanatyam, because all your gestures are similar to dancers. Why can't you do it? So each one should know what they are good at it, what they are not good at it. My turf is not domestic politics. Pardon? When you have a time, you will speak, sir. Please, you'll have a time. So that is the difficulty. Some are related, you can argue. But for instance, the policies of Bangladesh and things you cannot separate from West Bengal, I'm not denying the linkages. But this is not my specialization. I don't want to say things which I don't know, which I'm not competent to speak. I accept my ignorance. I'm not pretending it. But there are issues. And the second thing is, with the help of Fevicol, we can link up any two issues in the world. So therefore, when you talk about the subjects, let's focus on those issues. It is not what interests me What is on the table? That's important. If you want any question, yes. It's not your personal interest. We have a different agenda, different forum. But here is not, this is not the forum. People are talking about something. Either I contribute to that. If I don't contribute, listen to them. We all have an opinion. All the issues and everything under the sun. But that doesn't prevent us, from not recognizing what is on the table.
I wanted to broaden the discussion by asking Archana Upadhyaya, what would be the difference between Putin and Lavrov in terms of the G20 attendance? Lack of Putin and Lavrov being represented.
Yeah. So very good evening to all of you. My own assessment is that Lavrov would be much more assertive than what Putin would have been, and a consensus would be elusive. That's what I feel. Going by the track record of how Lavrov has conducted himself in different platforms, in fact, he says something which Putin would perhaps, he would have avoided, but he would be very blunt and perhaps aggressive too. That's what I feel. Thank you.
So my response will be the exact opposite of Archana's, that Li Keqiang is unlikely to be more pugnacious or aggressive as Xi Jinping would have been, although that's not the Chinese style. They would rather operate behind the scenes, get their agreements and disagreements out, and simply block anything that they did not want to get going. So I think Li Keqiang will come with his own brief. And I think the red lines are pretty clear as far as the basic core of what the Russian and Chinese position would be. And that would, I guess, steer the whole show. Thank you.
Making a difference, trivial differences. We are talking Xi Jinping is not representing, Prime Minister is representing, so it will be easy for us. We are talking Putin is not representing, Lavrov is representing, it's not so easy for us. We are students of international relations. Tomorrow, as if you are saying that our Prime Minister will be not there, this Foreign Minister will be different. Come on, policies are made at the top level. Whosoever comes, they come with the country's brief. And you can't say that these two leaders are there, it will be easy. This is trivializing issues. Because they will come. Chinese, a particular Chinese system or Soviet system. You can't utter a word against the regime, against the leader. Exactly same brief. I don't know. Maybe I would like to be enlightened by more findings about international relations. Sorry, I'm as a student now. These are my comments.
And after listening Professor Kumaraswamy's deliberation, and in my opinion, domestic policy is very much connected to foreign policy. We are discussing about G20, and we are more concerned about who is coming, who is not coming in G20. So we are, and we are not giving importance to the delegates or representative coming from the respective country if head of state is not coming. So that is not our concern. And any country who is sending representative, they are equally important to the head of the nation because he is representing to the nation, number one. Number two, sir, we are discussing about enormous opportunity has brought G20 for country, but I am sure every country is looking for enormous opportunity. And we have to give importance to every country, G20 country members. China is also looking for enormous opportunity. How China is making entry in West Asian studies. Since we are, I'm teaching West Asia. So China, it is not, the president is not coming, he is not looking, he is not concerned about the enormous exploiting enormous opportunity in West Asian region, or for that matter, out of this G20. And another important issue that enormous opportunity we are discussing from last 15 days, and I am at least enlightened with my colleagues about different area, how this G20 is connected, how G20 is going to get benefit out of that entire discussion. But What are those enormous opportunity? Sitting in SIS, we are claiming we are the only expert in you can say giving light to the entire country, or to the, what are those enormous opportunity? Let us explore. It is not the end. G20, of course, it is going to end this presidency in somewhere in November, but now our real work is started after G20. How we are going to, I mean, implement those list after G20. These are the enormous opportunity. So what we are going to achieve in next say 5 years, 10 years. If you throw some light, then it would be much easy for me to understand what we are going to do in next 5 years, 10 years, or in coming next years. Thank you, sir.
I understand Bangladesh was missing somewhere. So thank you very much. Thank you for, yeah, of course, Bangladesh is very important for India. And I really appreciate the government had invited Sheikh Hasina and Bangladesh as an observer, special invitee. Out of 9, they have chosen Bangladesh, our neighbor. 2-3 days back, the High Commissioner said that Bangladesh is the closest friend of ours in neighbor. Yes, we understand Bangladesh by many ways, in fact, geostrategically, geoeconomically. While we are looking at Indo-Pacific strategy, Bangladesh is very important. While we are connecting with the Southeast Asian countries, the way the Chinese are behaving in South China Sea, on Indian border. Recently, they have come out with the standard map of 2023, and 5 Southeast Asian countries has criticized the Chinese map, and the way Indian Prime Minister adjusted to visit in this ASEAN-India summit and East Asia summit. India is looking forward to not just looking at East, not just acting towards East, but trying to connect with East. And there, Bangladesh is a linchpin in between South Asia and Southeast Asia. Bangladesh is a bridge between India and the Southeast Asian countries. And I think Indian government had understood that gesture, and we had started extending number of projects, plans, like extending $8 billion of line of credit, the largest that India had extended to any country, that is Bangladesh. So that is one thing, keeping the increasing Chinese influence and presence in Southeast Asia. India had identified that let's explore our East, because India's almost 70% trades takes place towards the East. And you can see that the day by day or every year the trade between Southeast Asia and South Asia is, or India is increasing. 12% growth is in the last year itself. So it is very important that India had invited Bangladesh Prime Minister, and Bangladesh had also recognized it by number of ways, reciprocated. Bangladesh had participated in all the G20 meetings that had held in India. So they are also understanding, respecting that Indian sentiments and coming with them and participating, just not in the policy, they are reciprocating, but they are also reciprocating in that. The most important point, what in fact was missing in India, was connecting with the northeastern states of India. And there we have given, India had given by different policy perspective, I would say, from the Manmohan Singh government itself, that they have come donor ministry, and I think Vajpayee government had come with the donor ministry, and later on that continued, and keeping the development of northeastern states, we had given special packages to Bangladesh, resolved number of issues, because we wanted to connect India, the mainland India, with the northeastern states, not just on the power corridor or the other corridors, but also trying to connect them culturally, economically, like the way we have open border heart with these countries, so that two countries can connect. So my point is very submission to this very important G20 summit, and that I really congratulate Professor Kumaraswamy and Shamina for organizing this. That Bangladesh is very important part of this G20 summit. Particularly, it is messaging to all the other South Asian countries, because for India, it is not just Bangladesh. The other countries are also equally important. Pakistan is very important for India. We are trying to cultivate Pakistan by different approaches, as soft power and hard power, because we wanted to connect with Central Asian republics. We wanted to import natural resources from the Central Asian republics through TAPI, through Iran, Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, India pipeline, from the different way. We are trying to explore to reach to the Central Asian republics, Chabar and all that. So Pakistan is very important. Equally, Sri Lanka is also very important to keep India's maritime security and Indian Ocean security. So we are also trying to tap, and Nepal is also very significant. But since we have the Bangladesh has reciprocated, so it is very good initiative from Indian government that we invited Bangladesh in G27. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
Why Nigeria and Mauritius were invited? Of course, South Africa is a member in the G20, and is there any? I mean, Nigeria said that they want to be a member of the G20. In addition, of course, to the African Union as such. What are the implications of that? Nigeria and Mauritius. Would you like to say?
In the continent, it sees itself as a major power or the leading power. So for it to be a part of these G20 and forums like these would be important for it to project itself. So that's Mauritius is a very important gateway to Africa, because it's a bilingual country and we have ties with it, and Mauritius has always been a very important gateway in terms of moving into African countries and to African multilateral forums within Africa. So that's one more issue. And then a lot of Mauritius is also a very important investment channel to India. So these are all issues, large, very large. So these are things that I think ground tripping, and we have this treaty with Mauritius. So I suppose the importance is that Africa is a very significant continent in terms of its current status and in obviously future. So to ignore Africa or not provide space and opportunity for Africa to be in the such clubs or such multilateral forums is disadvantageous for the fora in a longer term. So I think to keeping long-term perspective, I think it is very important to engage and be able to use this opportunity to project our traditional friendship with Africa, and also provide Africa with a possible forum by asking, pushing for AU becoming a member to G20. I think that's.
Probably I'll be talking about Mauritius, because I feel that in terms of productive capacity index, if we see, so what I feel that Mauritius has outperformed in all the categories if we see in terms of productive capacity index. And apart from that, Mauritius has Indian diaspora, so it has the probably like 70% of Indian diaspora we have. So that is like this will be helpful. So yeah.
Would you like to say something on what Koreans can bring to the table?
Thank you very much. To remember Korea, because Korea is a very important member of the G20. However, Korea's, what we read G20, and if we see from the Korean perspective, they read it G2. And in that context, for Korea, it is very important what China is doing in the G20 and what the US is doing, because Korea is very much concerned with this fact. So, and many analysts in Korea, they see the world is heading towards G0, and that situation is a little bit complex for the Korean Peninsula. But I think Korea has graduated from the global south, is very much part of the global north, and India is protecting and articulating the interest of the global south. So there is some dichotomy between the two, and this comes in many of the India-Korea bilateral interactions, that the way Koreans, they want to see India and want to dictate many terms in terms of regulatory rationalization and so on and so forth. So I think in that context, both countries, they are now seeking something very different. And many of the Korea-Vietnam relations, they are much better footing in terms of economic interaction. But India-Korea interaction, though there is a big talk, everything is good, everything is excellent. But at the ground level, what India-Korea relation can be is not there. And I think that difference is that Korea has become the part of the global north and India is the global south. And that dichotomy is there. Thank you very much.
Shrikant, but I've had the privilege of actually having one lecture. So let me just reiterate a few points which I think are critical in terms of, particularly when we compare the Indonesian presidency and the Indian presidency. And I think one of the points which I think I made even in my presentation was that if you look at the three presidencies that are coming up, that is Indonesia, India, and Brazil, you see that the gap between the developed and the developing world is very clearly articulated in these three presidencies. In your inaugural statements, even when Professor Kumaraswamy made the statements, he talked about how these countries have now moved from a post-Cold War to a multipolar world. And when you look at the multipolar world order itself, while that power equations are very, very diverse and diffused, what you see is the distinctions in terms of your economic weight that each country carries is still a little lopsided in that sense. And particularly in your inaugural statements, you made you made certain comments relating to, for example, energy security as well as to climate change. Now, if you look at the context of energy security per se, I think what is important is that all these three economies that are now dealing with the presidency are still dependent on fossil fuel energy. We've not been able to move to the alternate energy systems. And I think this is one area where if you look at the UN convention itself, which is a 30-year-old convention, we've not been able to move towards this combined but differentiated responsibilities on climate change issues. So there's the talk is there, the rhetoric is there. How do we therefore push the developed countries within the G20 to take a much more clear-cut stand on how to address these matters? That has never been there. So the point is, while it's on paper, in terms of action, there is this gap. Similarly, if you take the context of climate change per se, you raise the Indonesian issue. I had discussed this in the paper that in the case of Southeast Asia particularly and Indonesia also, the question of how climate change is affecting both Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands is something that's a existential kind of a threat, especially for the Pacific Islands. So if you look at the impact of climate change, the move towards any kind of a climate intensive, or rather a security or a survival intensive mode is not yet there. So despite the Kyoto Protocol, despite your Paris Agreement, despite the Glasgow Summit, none of this has actually moved forward in terms of in terms of action. So I think that's a very big gap that we're going to see in the G20, because it's not just about rhetorically putting it on the table, but is also committing to bring about those changes. So I think here you're going to see the Indonesian presidency and the Indian presidency sort of dovetailing into one another, because it's going to carry forward that entire emphasis on what the developing world needs. I'll stop with that. Sorry. Thank you.
G20, G7 versus Global South. Can you please share your views? Gulshan, you go ahead till the time she question can also raise questions. hang on. Let him finish.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Well, in fact, there are 2 or 3 points which one should really be very looking at in the India's G20 presidency. No, we all know that whatever we might say, a large part of G20 agenda is always inherited, right? So if you look at a couple of earlier presidencies, more or less all issues were there, even in the Indonesian presidency or earlier presidencies. So we have to carry forward whether it was SDG or other issues. Now, coming particularly on this, now when India took presidency, so obviously we made it a pretty big presidency. And if you look at from the very beginning, what Prime Minister said that this is going to be what couple of used, I mean, ambitious, action-oriented, decisive, etc. That kind of presidency. But we also know that there were very serious geopolitical tensions in this point of time, and if you look at all the ministerial meetings so far, it has become quite clear that the differences are quite sharp, right, between between West, I mean particularly US and Europe, and Russia and China on the other side. So it was becoming more and more clear that we may not have kind of a consensus document at the end. I mean, still they'll keep working on this. We might see, but it's unlikely. So if that was the case, then suddenly, then you'll see after a few months, the narrative started to change very, very drastically. We had this global, the Voice of the Global South Summit, and then immediately, all the focus has been since then bringing the agenda of the developing country of the global south on the top of the agenda. One, of course, is that India has to, be representing now. And it's not that the first time development agenda is there on the G20. I mean, under the Korean presidency, in fact, they are the one who started in 2010, the development track. But in between, many things have happened. You have the SDGs came in 2015, and then you also have pandemic, etc. Now things have changed very, very drastically. So now we are trying to champion cause of the global south through this G20 presidency, because but you also see things have changed, because when we took over presidency, you had a very serious energy crisis, very serious food crisis, also inflation in almost 60, 70 countries. Now those tensions have, they are there is uncertainty, volatility, but I think the pressure is relatively less what it was, say, 10 months ago, 7 months ago. In the meanwhile, geopolitical tensions have gone up. So we have, and in fact, if you look at even the African Union membership, even when we had meeting of the Global South, where we said that more than 120 countries participated, India did not brought the issue of African Union membership in all at that particular meeting. This is a later we started pushing for this, and Africa has been there. I mean, if you look at the Chinese presidency, or you look at the German presidency or Italian presidency, somewhere or the other, they were trying to bring Africa there in different ways. But of course, those were token measures. So here, if we are able to push and get, membership of the African Union this time under G20 presidency, that will be one of the big achievements of Indian presidency. Because if we don't do that, then the next two are there. Again, Brazil and South Africa, they would also try to push it. But I think it's better if we do it under Indian presidency. Because if you look at all the issues today, you look at food security or migration, urbanization, all those issues, of course, Africa has to be there. But of course, there has to be consensus, because without consensus, because all other countries have already said that, most of them, at least 13, 14. But now, as Professor Kumaraswamy was saying, we have to walk the talk. So now we have to see really whether they were saying for political correctness, or they actually mean that they want African Union there. So those are the things. And then, in fact, just last point about when the Chinese president and Russian president, if they are not participating, I mean, obviously they are not boycotting G20. That's what a point I was making. They are very much there. They are participating. Now, two things would happen. Obviously, India would like to have those two presidents also to be here. It would have been a bit of a problem, particularly with the Russian president, but still it would have been good actually if he was there. And we were hoping till the last moment that both of them would be able to join, but if now they are not joining, so obviously technically nothing will change, because of course these countries are represented and they will make their point, whatever, forcefully or otherwise, because those things are anyway negotiated at the Sherpa level, not really at the leadership level. But one thing is clear, that if these two presidents are not participating, then the profile of the summit would be relatively slightly, I mean, I would say, affected. Because, you see, at the point when you have a very serious geopolitical tension, the Ukraine war is on, then you also have serious tension with the US and China, and also between India and China. So if those were there, the bilateral meetings between, say, Indian president and the Chinese president, or the American president and the Chinese president, or the Russian president and the Chinese, those would have really, the whole world would have been looking at those. Because, normally all the documents of G20, they are, boring documents. Nobody really, I mean, of course, as the researcher, as the analyst, we also will read very, very carefully. But, ordinary, I mean, anyway, most of the implementation would happen at somewhere else, not really at G20. So those are the, so yeah, I'm just finished. So this is the point which one has to keep in mind, that yes, I mean, those countries are represented, but it will affect somehow the profile of the summit, because if they are not there. Thank you.
We did not have a lecture, it seems. So 3 countries are members. So we have Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico. And the presidency is going to Brazil from 1st December. And we may just like to generalize that, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, they go along, and it's not so. Mexico has a very, very different stand, because it's more pro-US. It's bogged down with migration crisis. And because of being part of the USMCA, erstwhile NAFTA, it wants to remain closer to United States. Whereas Argentina and Brazil, they want to diversify. So they are not so much pro-US. They want to look for new partners. And with Lula in his 3rd term of presidency, he's a very powerful leader. And with the presidency going to Brazil, and he has already extended invitation to Mercosur, which is an economic grouping. So on the patterns of EU, we will have another regional grouping, Mercosur, who he has invited to be part of the organization and to help them. So, he's expanding the agenda to the global south, and he has been a champion of global south. So the very fact that the presidency is going to Latin America, and there is a Latin American agenda also, is a very, very important factor, more so in the context of climate change and sustainable development goal, because all the genesis of all these debates began in the Earth Summit, which was held at Rio de Janeiro. So contextualizing, these key issues where they emerge from global south, climate change, the sustainable development goal, the fund, I'm forgetting the name of the fund that was this biodiversity fund or something, which was started. So Brazil has a lot of, we have a lot to look forward to Brazil, because given the stature of Lula and Brazil in the Americas also, he's not to be taken very lightly. So we have a lot to see as the presidency passes from one global south leadership to another global south leadership. Thank you.
All is well when ends well. You deserve a big congratulations, Professor Kondapalli, as a dean of the school, and Professor Swami, Kumaraswamy, and the team. Basically, we are privileged to be part of this whole program of 15 days, fortnight in the sense. And here, I would like to mention my heartfelt congratulations to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Pandit, who has given us this opportunity to highlight our feeling about what we think about the leadership of G20. We have a divergent view. It's not basically coherent, as it was reflected by asking a question one of our students. It's a very, very good question. And faculty, Dr. Sandeep, has really asked a question. Until unless you you keep in your mind the domestic, what is the objective to achieve as a domestic policy, you cannot have a foreign policy. You cannot have a contradictory foreign policy with any country. So domestic policy is basically essential to in order to meet the requirements which you need in domestically. Second thing, here G20 is not the first event where faculty and the student of School of International Studies have been given much importance. Way back when our foreign policy was in the beginning, was on the word of formulation, we formulated NAM, and our school that was known as the Institute of International Relations. It was established along with Center for World Affairs, which is there in the Mandi House now. So we have been part of formulating our foreign policy. SARC, various things related to our foreign policy, which relates to Asia, Africa, and Latin America. We have been very vocal. We are talking about the global south. Basically, we have been vocal about the concern of these so-called third world countries and all. So here, I take this opportunity that we all have reflected our view, and despite of differences, we have never shied to come out with our opinion. And this is the essence of our school, School for International Relations. Long live JNU, long live our school. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks. The first observation of ma'am is cancel the talk. And then I rushed to the office and said, Kumar, there is no other way I could do that. Can you hold the fort? And, people who know me that even to go to my class, I do the dry run. Even after 23 years. I don't open my speech without, from good morning to till the end, I do the dry run, look at my watch, 25 minutes, that's what I do it. But unfortunately, this time I had only 5 minutes. Whatever it came to my mind, I said. And within that limitations, the kind of words I use, probably if I have to write, I would do differently. And probably I'm sure that some of you could sit here in 5 minutes time and do a better job than I do. The only problem is I never attended any of the G20 deliberations. Not in JNU, not anywhere else. Absolutely I have no clues what's going on then, because that is not my interest. I didn't even follow it. So within that limitation, I try to do my best. It is true that domestic politics and foreign policy are interrelated. Once again, my knowledge is limited, but the last book on the subject was written by Appadurai sometime in 1976. Nobody has done a book on that after that. So it's very easy to make a 2 minutes observation in any conference. Speak 45 minutes, come back with the book, let's talk. That is the difficulties of research. I think that we all know that. So if I use certain words, G2, it's like, when you ask a kid, what do you want to be? He will say, I want to be a scientist. That's definitely 30 years from now. So when I say G20, this is the worldview I'm looking at. How long it will take, how I have to do, that's the logistics to be worked out. And the very fact that, we have moved away from NAM to G20, that is a transformation. Go back and read all our NAM documents and read our G20 documents. The problem is walking the talk, that's right. But our transition was visible. If we talk about global south, do you really want India to be part of the developing world? Ask honestly. I don't think so. We want to be part of the developed world. We are not there yet. And we're very proud of saying that we are the 5th largest economy in the world. So it will take time. But that I agree. But the question is, when you say G2, it's a dream. It may take a long time to go. But I think unless you have a dream, you will not make your roadmap. That's the logic. It will not come overnight. We need to get that all the way. And absence, Gulshan sir, you're absolutely clear. Absence means, they're not boycotting. Absolutely right. My only submission is, if China is participating, if Russia is participating, why are you worried about Putin? The Putin presence or absence makes a difference. It conveys a very strong, powerful message, which any article on G20 summit will not escape these two facts, no matter what is the last line is. You will have to say 800 words, you have to say Putin was not there, she was not there. If he's not there, why? That is what it is. Their presence conveys a meaning, their absence also conveys a meaning. I think that is where we need to recognize. If everybody is a sovereign representative, even the ambassador of China can represent in the G20. There is no problem in that. Then why do you want a Putin for that? So that tells you something. Who comes, who doesn't come. I think that's what. My submission is, we should not be worried too much about Putin is there or not. That's my only submission. Let's get on with it. We will do, if they are there, well and good. If they are not there, because if we are worried about who is not there, we will ignore who is there. I think that we should not. It's like a wedding reception. Who is not coming is fine. But who is there, let's respect him. So if you do that, they will regret it. Maybe we should have come to Delhi. Maybe we made a mistake. Let them do it. I think that is what. If you're too much worried about them, we will not do a good job. That's my only submission. Maybe my word absence and things may not be appropriate. It just came and I just said. And the final thing, you know, what you have said, the ISIS, Indian School of International Studies, was established to understand the world. Okay? And I think that is where we should go to what Rana was saying. What will happen after 5 years? Probably we'll all make a personal commitment. We will go beyond the bilaterals. Let's study the country in its own absolute sense, not on the bilateral thing. That is what the foreign ministry does. If you talk to any diplomat, they cannot talk without the personal thing, when I was there. Remove them, they can't speak 10 minutes. Very few people can actually speak on the country without the first person. The expertise, let's develop. That is what ISIS was originally established. Whether it is in our thesis, whether it is our relationship, other in your writing, let's simply look at the countries without the bilateral part. If we do that, we will be contributing to the knowledge of G20. I stop here.
Photographs and recording. I'm grateful to the caterers from SSS for energizing our students with their well-served, enticing refreshments. I'm grateful to our ever-dependable Govind Rawatji for delivering the posters and banners and putting them up. I deeply appreciate a team of students who were the real pillars. They were with me, right? The time they could rub their eyes open in the morning till the time they hit their beds in the night. They were moving with amazing speed, efficiency, and creativity, adapting themselves on real-time basis to the changes on the ground. I would borrow your 2 minutes to recognize their efforts, because no amount of money or no amount of words would probably suffice them what they have done for us. So I would request the Dean to give these certificates. Prabhat Chavla. Kelvin. Member of the organizing committee, Irfan Ahmed Nazir. Anuradha Jangra. Deepika Matange. Rajat. Rajat. Abul Kalam. last and the lasting impact was those of our participants. And I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the participants, faculty, students, guests from outside. There were faculties who were speakers, but they also attended other lectures. There were faculties who didn't have to speak, but yet they came to turbocharge the event. Professor Alka, Professor Sharad Bhardwaj, Professor Archana, Dr. Sandeep, and many more whom I can't name at this point in time. Friends, a few things could have been done differently, I agree. And that's always there with every course of event. But while we were grappling with a lot of issues, we remained focused and never lost sight towards our core obligation towards SwayamPrabha. We had done the dry runs in this room, so we continued our program in this room. Because as they said, known devil is better than unknown one. So known set of problems were better than unknown set of problems. This was rolling, we allowed it to roll. And I can say with certain degree of conviction that I was right, because anything can happen, even monkeys can spoil the program. That's what they're talking at G20. I'm sorry for the inconvenience and the sweat that you all had some of the days, but believe me, the calm and composure with which it was endured speaks volumes about the perseverance and passion that we all had for SIS. And what makes it really big is that people who had different opinions, probably had different ways of doing things, but were rallying around for the purpose of SIS. So we held the fort for 15 long days, every single day with equal enthusiasm and energy. So with all my humility, I thank all of you and each one of you for putting your force and best wishes behind this event. Thank you so much.